Bon dia, good morning, bonjour. I'll just stop there. Maramutse. Good morning. I hope all of you rested well. Uh, we've had 2 very good days of discussion. Not enough time to hash through everything that we want to, but I think we've moved the dialogue along in a number of important issues. And this morning we have one last important issue on the diagnosis of malaria. Before I get started, let me just check. Jane, are you on the line? Can you hear us? Can we hear you?
Yep, I'm on the line. Good morning,
Good.
everyone.
Good
And I've
morning,
turned my
Jane.
video on, so you may be able to see me too.
Okay. Once we do the presentation, we'll see if we can get you on video. And not sure how we do this, but Jane has actually recorded her presentation. So let's see if we can actually, if this actually works.
So just a small note,
Yep.
Larry, if you can hear me,
Sure.
the presentation is recorded. However, you still have to click to the next slide.
Okay. All right.
So I'll listen. If you're going to be moving the slides, I'll listen along and can say next slide.
Okay. Let's see. That's working. All right. Let me just. All right. Well, I see your. Is the sound on? Maybe that's. All right. All right. Okay.
We can just advance it from here so she can start.
Yeah. Well, it's recorded, so.
Hi, good morning. Thanks to the organizers for this invitation to present to you this morning about HRP2 deletions and some other diagnostic challenges. I imagine many of you. Next slide. I don't hear anything. I'm not sure if you do or if you can hear me. Again, I'm not sure if you can hear me. It doesn't, from my side, I'm not seeing anything moving or hearing anything. Or HRP3. And what we saw here is that you could see very high levels of positivity across many different products against the wild type. However, against the double deleted parasites, we saw very low to no reactivity. And the single deleted parasites that still contained HRP3, we saw pretty good levels of reactivity. And that illustrates this cross-reactivity. So the positivity rate was somewhere between 70 to 100%. And this cross-reactivity is really critical to reducing the clinical impact of HRP2 deletions because you can lose the HRP2 gene and the protein that it encodes for. And if you still have HRP3, you may still get a positive. So HRP2 deletions are not really new, and this is a problem that we've been talking about for some years now. And I hope many of you are already familiar with the first published report of HRP2/3 deletions in clinical isolates in 2010 in Peru. And in this case, the investigators at that time found samples from patients that were clearly positive by microscopy but were negative on the HRP2 based RDT. And they found in this one particular instance that 41% of the isolates lacked HRP2, and amongst those, 21% lacked both HRP2 and HRP3 and were completely invisible to the HRP2 based RDTs. And the region there responded quickly with surveys in other parts of Peru and in the neighboring countries, which did reveal deletions elsewhere. And so they quite quickly pivoted away from HRP2 based RDTs, or exclusively based HRP2 RDTs, I should say. But in this case, it was not a huge ordeal because microscopy was not the mainstay of diagnosis in Peru, let alone within the region. And so this, as I said, was initially found in 2008, reported in 2010, and then was really, I would say the turning point came more around 2016. In the meantime, in the years following the reports in Peru, there were some scattered reports of cases from Senegal and Mali. And then in 2016, we first saw reports, significant reports emerging from countries in Africa and Asia, where unlike in South America, where HRP2 based RDTs now, in this case, are the primary diagnostic tool. And this slide just gives two examples of published reports from Eritrea and from India. In the two sites in Eritrea, we found a very high prevalence of HRP2 deletions, the majority of these being dual deletions, and the average across two sites was 62% of the PF infections had dual deletions of HRP2 and HRP3. In India, on the other hand, across the several HRP related investigated for deletions, they found that the overall prevalence was low, around 2%, but across these 8 sites, there was a certain degree of variability. And I will say that that subsequent studies also in Eritrea showed quite a heterogeneous picture. So just to go a little deeper into these malaria threat maps, when you click on the dot, the reference pops up and the data is presented based on the number of samples that were tested for deletions. So the threat maps essentially present what is in the published report. And typically, what is consistent pretty much across all reports, or what you can extract, is the percentage of HRP2 deleted samples amongst those were tested. But you don't always know the total sample of PF cases that those samples came from. And so sometimes we don't know, we don't have the denominator that we would like. We just know they tested 10 samples, or in this case, they tested 89 samples, and amongst those 89 samples, there were deletions reported in 9%. But you may not know, or it may not be within the published report, from how many PF cases did those 89 samples come from, and why were those 89 samples selected. So across the various studies that we have extracted data from and populated the maps with, the populations are quite different in terms of the age of the patients, whether or not they were symptomatic or asymptomatic, and what exactly were the selection criteria for the genotyping. Was it all samples? Was it samples that had what we refer to as a discordant picture, in which the HRP2 RDP is negative, but a PAN or a PFLDH or a microscopy was positive? And so you really need to have a lot of those details to be able to try and determine what the prevalence is, and whether you're looking in the general population or amongst the symptomatic population, perhaps presenting to health facilities. So the RDT results are often not always known. And as I presented on some of these earlier slides, having that sometimes HRP2 deletions can be present, and they do not result in a negative RDT result. And so it's really most critically important for us to know if these deletions are causing false negative RDT results. And so I just want to encourage you that if you want to get more detailed information about any of the points that you see on these maps, you really should go back to the original source in order to properly interpret those results. And unfortunately, because of everything I've said, we cannot currently use the maps to determine exactly where policy is intended to be, or should be changed, rather. And it's difficult to make direct comparisons between countries at this point, because the surveys may not have been done exactly the same way. Also, it's difficult to generalize to an entire country, because we know that the picture may be quite heterogeneous. And in terms of the way forward, what we are developing right now is going to be a complement to these malaria threat maps, and it's going to be a dashboard where you can see what surveys are planned or ongoing, and also will be indicating where we know RDT policy has changed. So we're concerned, as I said, about HRP2 deletions that are generating negative RDT results, because those can lead to missed or delayed diagnosis. So keep in mind that the cause of the false negative RDTs, however, is probably more often related to things like operator error or product defects that may be related to issues with manufacturing, or damage related to incorrect transport and storage. Or in some cases, of course, these may be low-density infections that are below the limit of detection of the test, and that can result in these false negative results. So I just want to take a few minutes to advise you a bit on when you should suspect HRP2 deletions, because we know there are a number of different causes for negative or false negative results. And so what we advise is that if you're dealing with an individual patient, you should consider or suspect HRP2 deletions when there's a negative result on an HRP2 test line of at least 2 quality assured malaria RDTs, and there's a positive on the PAN or the PF PLDH test line if a combination test is being used, and the sample is confirmed microscopically to be positive for P. falciparum by 2 qualified microscopists. So if you're not using a combination test, then this second criteria doesn't apply. In that case, you would be relying on repeat HRP2 negative test lines on 2 quality assured RDTs and the results of quality assured microscopy. I think it's also important to consider other factors like travel history, because we know now of areas where there are particularly high prevalence of HRP2 deletions. And I think this is relevant locally, but obviously also it's been proven to be relevant in countries where they've been seeing returning travelers and have confirmed deletions. And so the second, and I've put this image here of these delicately balanced rocks because I wanted to raise the awareness here that of all the potential causes of false negative results, we need to keep the communication channels open so that we allow for investigations, but we're also critical not to undermine, it's also critical not to undermine the health workers' confidence in the results, because you obviously see a lot of negative RDT results, and we can't let all of these potential reasons for why those might be false negatives undermine the confidence that health workers have in these results. And so it is a bit of a delicate balance. You want to raise awareness, but you don't want people to distrust the RDTs. And I think that that's where the importance of surveillance also comes in, because if you can reassure those health workers that there are other activities that are ongoing that are monitoring for the prevalence of this issue, and that there are certain thresholds that if those are met, that the RDTs will be changed, people will be retrained or advised on how to use these new RDTs, and they'll continue to have confidence in the RDTs they're using up until that point in time. And so it is a delicate balance, and would love to hear experiences from some of you as to how you are coping with this. Then at another level, you may sort of say, okay, well, that's at the individual level. What about at a programmatic level? When should the NMCP be concerned? And so we have a few pieces of advice here. So in the program setting, if you see rates of discordance between the results of RDTs and microscopy, which are systematically greater than or equal to around 10 to 15%, with the higher positivity rates being in microscopy, this is when you should consider the possibility of HRP2 deletions. Similarly, and what has been the case in countries like Eritrea and in Djibouti, when the National Malaria Control Program is receiving multiple formal complaints or even anecdotal evidence of RDTs that are returning false negative results, it's important to carefully listen to those reports and to conduct investigations into them, because this is often the mechanism by which these problems are brought to the attention of the program. And we advise that when HRP2/3 deletions have been reported in the country, that a baseline prevalence should be determined in that affected country, but also in the neighboring countries. And you can just glance over here at the malaria threat map, kind of zooming in more on the African continent. And you see a lot of dots here, and you see a lot of missing dots. So anywhere where there are those red dots, there should be baseline surveys conducted, and in those neighboring countries. And I think there are a number of surveys underway, but we're certainly behind where we would like to be in order to have a good sense of the scope and magnitude of this problem. And so a question we're often asked is when to switch away from exclusively HRP2-based RDTs. And we advise that when the prevalence of symptomatic patients carrying HRP2-deleted parasites causing false negative HRP2 RDT results is greater than equal to 5%, that's the threshold for change. And so this threshold of 5% was selected because it is somewhere around this point that the proportion of cases that are missed by the HRP2 RDTs due to the non-HRP2 expression may be greater than the proportion of cases that would be missed by a less sensitive PLDH-based RDT. And so if we've looked in the literature, looking at how the sensitivity of HRP2 RDTs and PFLDH RDTs compared to microscopy or to PCR, and in several studies, that difference is somewhere between 5 to 77% amongst the symptomatic individuals. So that's where this threshold or this trigger for change comes from. It isn't about there being simply 5% of the parasites found in the population are HRP2 deleted. It has to be linked to HRP2 deletions that are causing HRP2 negative RDT results. And that's a very important distinction. And I've put this equation, which comes from one of the survey templates that I'll mention in a moment here on the screen, so you can appreciate that difference and that subtlety. So essentially, the criteria for change really hinge on what is contributing most to missing cases. Is it the HRP23 deletions, or is it the reduced sensitivity of the LDH test line? And so really what we're doing here is balancing trade-offs, and that is really the determining factor. And it is not just about the prevalence of HRP2 deletions in the population, it's about the HRP2 deletions that are causing negative RDT results. So you might wonder, so if I've made this point a few times, and you might ask, well, why wouldn't HRP2 deletions result in a negative HRP2 RDTs? And there are a few reasons, and I'll just go over them here. So one reason is because of the presence of multiclonal infections with wild type and with PF-HRP2 related falciparum parasites. So if you have a mixture of parasites, as long as there is one parasite that is expressing HRP2, there is a very good chance that that RDT is going to be positive, even if HRP2 deleted parasites are also present. And it is possible to detect these multiclonal infections with multiplex real-time or digital drop PCR, but not with conventional PCR. Another reason why HRP2 deletions might not result in a negative RDT is if there is residual HRP2 from previous PF infections, and the current infection is with deleted parasites. And the next reason is one that I alluded to in one of my initial slides, and that's if HRP3 is present, because if the antibodies on the RDT strip, so the particular brand that you're using, reacts with those common epitopes. And so the focus is clearly on clinically relevant HRP23 deletions, screening in symptomatic populations, and prioritizing molecular analysis of samples that have this discordant or suspicious profile of being HRP2 negative and PF or pan-LDH or microscopy positive. And so we know that this approach is going to underestimate the true prevalence of HRP23 deletions in the entire population. But we are trying to focus on what's clinically relevant and what can be feasibly done in terms of screening in the context of routine care and being economical in terms of prioritizing the molecular analysis of those samples that are most suspicious. So we recommend that this switch, and I mentioned that this recommendation is further informed by mathematical models that show that these parasites lacking HRP2 genes are likely to spread under HRP2 only RDT pressure, and that a switch may also be decided because of the complexity of procuring and training in the use of multiple RDTs. So there are multiple reasons why, if this threshold is met, that it's sensible to apply that change nationwide, that having data from different regions of the country may be very useful in prioritizing the rollout of those alternative RDTs. And I'm just have a few links on this slide to useful documents. One of them is a response plan, so a kind of strategy to responding to the emerging threat of HRP2 deletions, which we published a few years ago, that lays out some core activities. The first and foremost one being mapping the distribution and frequency of deletions and promoting the use of harmonized protocols for which we developed, and our links are here on this slide. We've also built an international network of laboratories who have experience performing these complex molecular conformation techniques that are required to have mapping that is according to high standards, and also working with some of those laboratories to identify new and or more efficient ways of screening for deletions. We've also worked to support and will continue supporting countries in the selection and procurement of new RDTs when a change of testing is warranted. And we've been advising commercial manufacturers on the priorities for new tests and are going to be working particularly hard over the course of the next year or so to provide better estimates related to market forecasts. So you might ask yourself, why don't we just change to non-HRP2 RDTs? Why are we going to all of this trouble of surveillance and potentially undermining health workers' confidence in these tests? And let's just not worry about this problem at all. And I truly wish it was that simple. As you all know, the reason that HRP2-based RDTs became so popular and the market leaders is because they are highly sensitive and heat stable. And unfortunately, the low prices, well, fortunately and unfortunately, fortunately for us, at this point in time, unfortunately, the profit margins that many of these manufacturers have seen have been quite small, and there's been little room for investment to improve the non-HRP2 based targets. There is only one WHO pre-qualified pan-LDH product that performs well against HRP2 expressing and non-expressing parasites, but that manufacturer has had a notice of concern on their door for over 2 years now, and we're not sure about their ongoing interest in the field. However, there are products that have received ERPD approval and can be purchased with Global Fund money that that target PFLDH RDTs. These are manufactured by a company called Rapigen. These products are also in the WHO pre-qualification pipeline, and they have passed the lab evaluation, meaning they do meet our minimum performance requirements against both HRP2 expressing and HRP2 deleted parasites. And we're also very pleased that there is a new generation of PFLDH RDTs in the field trials this year, and hoping that that data is going to become available in the coming months, and that those products may also be considered for ERPD approval and eventually WHO pre-qualification. So there are alternatives, but the menu is extremely limited, and we do have serious concerns about the supply security that we would potentially face if everyone was to pivot away from HRP2-based RDTs to these very limited number of alternatives. And we know that countries are currently paying elevated prices for those PFLDH RDTs. Now, that could change, obviously, based on volumes, but we do have reason to be concerned that it would not necessarily be a good move to have the entire global market shift in one direction. And so we're currently advising that countries have an evidence-based approach to this change. And that approach may also be modified as we see what results are looking like from products that are coming out of field trials this year, as more information is gathered related to market forecasting and whether there may be possibilities for the current HRP2-based manufacturers to pivot to PFLDH RDTs and how we might be able to facilitate that. So that's the HRP2 deletion story, and I just want to take a few last minutes to touch on a couple of other important challenges that I think you're facing. I just realized that I've gone over time here now, so I'm going to try to wrap this up quite quickly. I think in addition to optimally using the existing tools through good procurement practices, training, and supervision, we also need to address some problems that are even farther upstream. And this relates to accessing diagnostic testing services. So The graphic on the left here is one I prepared from data in the World Malaria Report that's based on household surveys in 20 African countries. And what you'll see here is that if you consider all children under 5 years with fever, about 70% of them sought treatment, but just over a quarter of them actually received a diagnostic test. So if countries ever want to move to elimination, they must achieve universal access and really try to understand the barriers to access and address them, as there is much room for improvement here. And I think this really requires a multidimensional approach targeting patients and providers. And in some cases, it's about expanding existing solutions in terms of, community health workers and ICCM, getting RDTs into pharmacies and to train drug vendors who can just expand the reach of these really transformational point of care tests. I think that I'm getting questions recently, and I think have been spurred on by COVID, related to the role for self-testing. And I think perhaps this is an area that there needs to be some research done. I think there's a lot of differences between COVID and malaria, and this is an area that needs to be approached with some trepidation. But I think there are some examples, and there's a link here to a specific example where self-testing was employed to a particular group in French Guyana. I think we also know that there is some appetite for alternatives to blood-based testing, and non-invasive testing might be something that could further expand the reach. And I think there's also room for expanding use for digital tools, even just for data capture, that would allow us to better target our interventions. And also the role of those tools also in enhancing quality control. And then for some years, there's been a lot of reports of missed low-density infections and accordingly questions about the use of high-sensitive tests. And so I have a question mark here as to, is this a challenge? And I think it's important to appreciate that these low-density infections are not something new. Their importance relative to individuals and public health has been a long-standing question. Conventional RDTs were not designed to detect low-density infections, which are often below the threshold associated with clinical symptoms. However, in terms of detecting parasitemias associated with clinical disease, RDTs and microscopy do a good job if they are performed correctly. And so with this graph on the right is just one example of the distribution of parasitemia and HRP2 plasma levels. And so just moving from top to bottom, you can see that at the distribution, perhaps just, let me just see if I can get a pointer here. Sorry about this. Here, so you can focus here on the peripheral blood parasitemia, and this is in, see if I can go, sorry, next. This is in negative, RDT negative healthy controls. The next, this is in asymptomatic carriers. This is in uncomplicated, or patients with uncomplicated malaria, and in patients with severe malaria. And this is the distribution of their parasitemias. And what the red bar here is essentially about the 200 parasite per microliter threshold. And this is around the sensitivity of rapid diagnostic tests, and probably just above what we see for good field-based microscopy. And what I wanted to point here is it's in these asymptomatics where you see more of these lower density infections, and very few in the patients with uncomplicated malaria, and even fewer in those patients with severe malaria. And so the question here is, who are you trying to target? If you're trying to target these asymptomatic infections, then yes, you need a more sensitive test. But if your target is to detect the patients with uncomplicated and with severe malaria, then those RDTs are doing a very good job if they're detecting at these limits of detection, at capturing the majority of patients. And this has panned out in any studies where they have looked at the advantage of using high sensitive tests, particularly, let's say, the high-sensitive RDT in clinical settings, that the yield associated with the high-sensitive test compared to the conventional RDT has been very limited. And so I think perhaps some more research is always welcome in this area, but based on what we have so far, we're not seeing a great yield of higher sensitive tests in these clinical settings. And that this is the relative importance of these infections to sustaining transmission in moderate and high transmission areas is unlikely, and that it's probably much more likely that all the individuals not accessing prompt diagnosis and treatment are much greater contributors to ongoing transmission, and I would argue would be a better focus of our attention. And so the last challenge that I wanted to mention is that these limits of detection that I have here on this slide are really contingent on several factors that the NMCPs must manage, because any break in the chain can compromise performance and thereby outcomes. And so what I'm getting at is good procurement practices, purchasing good quality reagents, equipment, and of course, high quality training and supervision. So I'm going to conclude here, if I can move to the next slide. So in conclusion, globally, there are hotspots for HRP2/3 deletions, particularly in South America and in countries in the Horn of Africa, and models predict other high-risk areas also in sub-Saharan Africa. Surveillance should be a high priority for all countries, particularly where HRP2/3 deletions have been reported locally or in neighboring countries. We want to avoid the crisis situations which we've been dealing with in recent years, particularly in Horn of Africa countries. We know that with continued HRP2 RDT pressure, we expect this problem to be ongoing and potentially getting worse. And particularly in areas where malaria is being driven down to low levels, these may be areas where there will be the highest risk. Alternative tests that do not rely exclusively on HRP2 for diagnosis of PF are available. They're in the PQ pipeline, in field trials, and some have Global Fund ERPD approval. Removing barriers to access to diagnosis could have a much bigger impact than detecting low-density infections, particularly in moderate high transmission areas, and that realizing the full potential of diagnostics requires that all links in the chain are strong and maintained. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you, Jane. Can we have the lights up? And also, if possible, if we could have Jane on video so she could participate in the panel. I do also want to invite up our NMCP representatives from Ethiopia, from Zambia, and unfortunately Madagascar didn't make it to the meeting, but since we do have a representative from Djibouti, I thought I might invite him up as well. So please, please come up and join the panel. So, I think we'll start off first. Oh, and there's Jane. Hi, Jane. Good. I think we'll start off with our representative from Ethiopia. And if I could ask you since you're dealing with HRP2 deletions, how your program is addressing this new challenge to your program.
Okay. Good morning, all. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. So I want to address the diagnostic challenges in Ethiopian context. From our context, any suspected malaria cases should be diagnosed either by RDT or microscope. And also every year more than 95% of the cases were confirmed either by microscopy or RDT. And RDT is used at health post level, and we use microscopy at health center and hospital level. So we have around 16,000 health posts in the country, and also we have community health workers. More than 32,000 health workers are working on those health posts. So mainly they are focusing on malaria diagnosis and the treatment. So more than 70% of the cases were diagnosed by community health workers using RDT. This is a big achievement for the country. And especially at this current time, the diagnosis shift towards the health center and the health hospitals because of the community health insurance and the health seeking behavior of the communities improved for the sake of good quality. So almost half of the total cases in the countries detected at health post level. So in terms of malaria species, around 70 to 80% is due to falciparum, and also the remaining 20 to 30% averagely is due to Plasmodium vivax. And also we have some mixed infection for both species. So the main challenge recently detected is the emergence of false negative RDT results due to the deletion of HRP2. So as we now, especially in neighboring countries, Eritrea, Sudan, and the South Sudan, reported gene deletion. So after that, we also tried to conduct a small-scale study on the cross-border areas of Sudan and Eritrea, and also South Sudan area. So at that time, the study findings shows around 10% prevalence of false negative RDTs due to this HRBT gene deletion. So after this, we conducted a national level survey regarding the prevalence of HRP2 deletion. The finding shows around 7.1% prevalence of HRP2 gene deletion. And it is very heterogeneous, and especially it is very different across the country. So in both the studies, it shows above the cutoff point of threshold above 5%. Then we try to address this issue. So the other challenges are regarding the clinical diagnosis, especially at health center and the hospital level, because of the physicians' confidence on the laboratory results. Because some of due to the skill gap and the technical issues, the physicians do not lack confidence on the lab result. Then they treat clinically. Also in some areas there is a low parasitemia, especially in low transmission areas. So laboratory technicians can't detect in those areas that are in low transmission setting. The other challenge in Ethiopian context is the quality of diagnostic tools, especially the poor quality of GMSA solution. This is always a complaint of laboratory technicians. And also regarding the RDT, there are some quality issues like the buffer solution is dry in some cases, and we will continue that in monitoring. And other issues regarding the infrastructure, microscopy, shortage of microscopy, especially in the newly constructed health centers. So this one's also another issue, and there's a shortage of laboratory technicians in terms of human resources. These are more of the main challenges regarding the malaria diagnosis in our context. So to address these all issues, as Minister of Health, we developed a policy brief in form of concept note, and that concept note is already endorsed to switch off to non-HRPT RDTs. So a small quantity of RDTs on the procurement process to substitute the regular RDT as we are using. So another options we are trying to address those laboratory technicians in terms of improving their skills to detect the capacity of their detection, especially during the pre-service training. We focus on the graduating class of laboratory technicians working with teaching institutions. So at the end of their graduation, we will provide detailed training on laboratory diagnosis. So it improves their technicians may have no experience in detecting those species. So we use some standard slides. So the laboratory technicians try to read the standard slides to improve their skills. Also, during the in-service training, we also provide some specific trainings to laboratory technicians based on the assessment. We conduct a regular support supervision and a review meeting. Based on the findings, we design specific trainings for those laboratory technicians to improve their skill and capacity. The other mechanisms, we are also conducting mentorship, especially using highly certified laboratory technicians. We use them and to mentor and provide technical assistance on regular basis to all laboratory technicians. We also expand the external quality assurance, working by national laboratory, and also we have regional laboratory at regional health bureaus. So we are trying to expanding the laboratory quality assurance centers detected by health workers. So especially in areas where there is high gene deletion reports, we try to focus as a short-term solution. All those negative RDTs should be referred to health centers or to hospitals to cross-check the result. So the other issues regarding the alternative RDTs we are going to use, especially in Ethiopian context, we have different species, falciparum, vivax, and mixed infection. So the available RDTs that fit to the context of Ethiopia is very limited, and this might be one of the challenge we are currently facing as a country. Thank you.
Thank you. I know we're putting you on the spot, the representative from Djibouti, a little bit, because you just found out you were going to be on the panel. But if you could share some of your experiences and lessons learned from addressing HRP2 deletions in your country, we definitely appreciate it.
Bonjour tout le monde. Je vais parler en français. Merci de mettre vos écouteurs. Pour Djibouti, je m'appelle Samatar Kayat. Je suis le coordinateur du programme national de Djibouti. Nous avons déjà eu ces problèmes en 2019 et en 2020. À l'aide de l'OMS et le ministère de la Santé, il y avait des échantillons qui ont été, des études qui ont été menées pour évaluer ces délétions et son impact. Nous avons eu 40% de délétions avec les tests rapides qu'on utilisait à l'époque, les StarCard. Mais actuellement, et depuis, le pays a commencé de changer, ou bien on a commencé les procédures pour qu'on puisse changer ces tests rapides. Début 2021, le pays a opté pour le pays crédit, les tests rapides PLDH, qui étaient plus sensibles, mais effectivement qui coûtaient beaucoup plus cher que celles qu'on utilisait avant. Du coup, on a dû faire des économies de gauche à droite pour que le pays puisse s'offrir ou opter pour cette test rapide. Nous avons, comme la parasitémie, le pourcentage du Plasmodium falciparum en 2021, c'était à 65%. Pour les Vivax, on était à 35%. Les meilleures pratiques, j'espère que vous m'entendez. Yes. Les meilleures pratiques que nous avons dû tirer de ces études en collaboration avec l'OMS, c'était de renforcer en même temps la capacité des techniciens de nos laboratoires Et depuis 2021, nous le faisons des sessions de renforcement des techniciens de laboratoire de toutes les structures. Il y a aussi un guide contrôle qualité qui a été élaboré et mis en œuvre. Et depuis, nous le surveillons, malgré que ces tests est sensible à nos jours, nous le surveillons que ces délétions puissent être à l'ordre du jour. Il y avait un autre problème, un autre challenge qu'on a dû faire face, c'était la confiance des praticiens ou des techniciens qui ont su que c'était que ces 40%, il y avait plus de faux négatifs et que c'était et après qu'on a dû changer les tests rapides, il fallait sensibiliser nos praticiens et dire que le test a été changé et que dorénavant, en collaboration avec le laboratoire national du pays, ce nouveau test est surveillé et suivi de près. C'était grosso modo le problème qu'on a dû faire face concernant ces délétions du gène HRPD et HRPD3. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. And for Busiku from Zambia, we know that you haven't yet had to deal with HRP2 deletions, but you have a very long history of doing very good quality assurance for malaria diagnostics, and we thought it would be nice if you could share your experiences and your lessons learned from over a decade of really rigorous quality assurance. So.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. Yes, indeed, just to sort of start by responding to that comment, we have not done any extensive work in the area of HRP2 deletions. I think from my collection, there's been some work that was done by one of our partners in a district called Nchelenge and Macha, but their findings were inconclusive. And it's interesting that the timing of this meeting coincides with us actually thinking through the process around trying to develop a protocol to try and see where we are with this particular issue. So we've been reaching out to WHO for technical assistance as well as other partners. So just to put in context diagnosis in Zambia, so we have roughly about 3,000 health facilities. They keep increasing almost on a monthly basis. And our policy, before you treat every suspected case, is supposed to be tested with a confirmatory diagnostic tool. And the tools that we have, of course, is microscopy and rapid diagnostic tests. Of these 3,000, roughly around 400 have fully functional microscopy services with one or two microscopists deployed. RDTs are essentially found in all the health facilities. And even in the ones that have microscopy, because the microscopists are not always there, so the staff that are there when the lab is essentially closed can still use RDTs to diagnose any suspected cases. So we have been implementing our on-site, our OTSS program for quite some years, as indicated. Essentially, this is really trying to focus on quality of care, trying to improve our quality of care services. So these are visits that are done to various health facilities across the country, essentially on a quarterly basis. So they look at both the clinical aspect as well as the diagnostic aspect of how our patients are managed. So there is a developed checklist in this regard. And the teams normally that do this coincide of a clinician as well as personnel from the staff. So there's a process of actually asking questions to find out how the diagnosis is done by the various cadres in that particular facility. Then in addition to that, there's also observation on how they do the RDTs, on how they do their microscopy, essentially to identify any challenges that can be seen during that process of observation, also identifying certain best practices, and as well as addressing or providing technical support on site for any challenges that are observed in those various facilities. We're in the process of now sort of ramping up that from the health facility level to try and push it as well to a community level, trying to have that quality of care aspect brought at a community level as well. So in addition to the OTSS program, we've also been trying to improve the quality of our microscopy through proficiency testing. We started developing our slide bank quite some time back, and it keeps developing over time. And these slides are used to train, to do proficiency testing for microscopists across the country, to just improve, the level of microscopy diagnosis and the quality of the diagnosis throughout the country. We have, of course, one or two challenges that's important for us to share. In the sense of our on-site supportive supervision, our OTSS, we haven't ramped it up fully to scale the way we would really desire, because what we would want is to have quarterly visits to the various facilities that have been selected, and of course return to those where we see challenges a bit more often to try and see how we improve that level of quality of care. The other one is, I think was also alluded to by my colleagues, is the issues around supplies, and this is timely supplying of these commodities, not only the consumables for microscopy, but also the rapid diagnostic tests themselves. I think all of us had a challenge when COVID hit in terms of just general commodity supplies for our malaria programming. And really it's important for us to think forward in terms of what we actually need to do to ensure that we have resilient programs to cushion us from all these sort of shocks. Most of our countries, mine included, actually import most of these consumables. So there's been discussions in country around trying to ramp up our buffer stock and things like that, so that if we have any sort of pandemic or any other challenges that can come and affect that, would have in-country support, so that our diagnosis is not affected, our confirmatory diagnosis is not affected moving forward. Then, of course, I think I had alluded to this in the beginning around really trying to understand where we are with this, our HRP2 deletion status, trying to also think about, what that has in terms of an implication for our malaria program moving forward. So I'll end here. Thank you.
Sikomo. I think we lost Jane. Jane, are you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Before we get questions from the audience, is there anything you wanted to react to or supplement from your presentation?
No, I mean, I'm just grateful for the additional comments from the various panel members. And I think, a lot of, they've got into more details around the actions they're taking to support training and supervision, quality assurance of the test, just to be sure, or to try and ensure that the tools that we have are doing their role as optimally as possible. So I didn't have a lot of time to go into that during my presentation. So it's really reassuring to hear about the range of activities, and also, the expansion of services at the community level, trying to, boost the access factor there. So kudos to all of the panelists and for all of their contributions. It's and to, it's a real pleasure and privilege to be supporting countries as we can. We mentioned in Zambia, yes, we are working with colleagues there. We've actually underway right now as a shipment of PFLDH RDTs to support a survey that hopefully will get off the ground in the coming months in Zambia. And then also a pleasure to have worked with colleagues in Djibouti to make critical decisions around changes in procurement choices for RDTs, and finding ways to work around those high prices. And also very reassuring to hear in Ethiopia that finally there's going to be a change in RDT practice there, and I imagine targeting those areas that are at highest risk right now, and as was mentioned, this is a very heterogeneous picture, and certainly the having a picture in different regions of the country can help prioritize rollout, and I think Ethiopia will be an excellent example of that in action.
So we'll open it up for questions, comments from the audience. All right. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your good presentations. I would like to ask a question to Busiku about what he presented about Zambia. So yesterday I think most of us went to the field visit where we visited community health focus, and we know very well that in Rwanda they are contributing to more than 60% of treatment and diagnostic of malaria, uncomplicated malaria in Rwanda. But one of the challenges that we still have is ensuring quality control and quality assurance of the diagnosis they are providing. We are doing supportive supervisions, we are meeting with them, but for me it's still, comparing to their contribution, it's not sufficient. I would like to hear from Zambia, because he talked about quality control and quality assurance, or maybe someone else, the good experience or the experience, if they can share experience on what they are doing to really ensure quality, especially for the diagnosis at the community level. Thank you.
Do we have other questions? Go ahead.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. Question for Jane. Thanks very much for that presentation. It was really very, very informative. I was...
Go ahead.
Bonjour, je suis Seynabou Gaye du Sénégal. Et je voudrais savoir par rapport au taux de faux négatifs, au pourcentage de délétion, à quel niveau il faut penser changer les tests qu'on utilise. Parce que dans les résultats qu'on a vus, on a des taux entre 5 et 7%. Et est-ce que c'est des niveaux raisonnables ou c'est des niveaux déjà où il faut s'inquiéter et penser à switcher les tests que l'on utilise? Merci.
Thanks. This is also for Jane, but also for everybody else. I just wanted to follow up on what Mehul was saying about, do we need reference places to do the surveillance? It's more of a comment, but because if you look even in Rwanda, not many countries do RDT and microscopy. They will either do just RDTs at the community level or at the health center. So the idea of trying to say, okay, when you see RDT negative and microscopy positive, we will probably never see this because we don't do that in most of the countries. So this then presents a challenge because when will a country really see that thing, until you probably go in there and do surveillance or something like that. So just wanted to comment and maybe hear thoughts on how would countries approach this because we hardly do the two together. Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll have our panelists respond. Jane, I'll start with you and responses to the comments and questions.
Okay, so I'll start with Mehul because I think that was directed at me. So the approach that we're taking is a very practical one, as for the reasons that I mentioned. We, however, do recognize, and even the survey protocol templates do advise that if resources are available, that a subset of the HRP2 samples from HRP2 are deletions. Again, just to look for some signal that although the main focus is on clinically significant deletions, we're still interested in getting a signal as to whether or not these parasites are present in the population, likely to start posing a problem. And I wish that we had historical data that would allow us to predict what that timescale data is very, very difficult. There is some from Peru, but in Peru, we don't even have the issue of HRP2 pressure, RDT pressure, and we see this parasite now as essentially the wild type, and we don't know what the drivers are in those cases. So I think you're absolutely right, that if resources are available to look in these other sample populations that will be acquired through implementation of the current survey protocols. In terms of, and also we say if with something that is implementable within the current, that expensive and complicated molecular analysis on all samples. But if resources are available, it can certainly be done. We are looking this year to updating the protocol survey templates for sentinel site monitoring, I think along the lines of what you were describing. And then in terms of laboratories that can support this, we do actually have a network of 8 laboratories. I didn't include that slide in my presentation today, but we definitely do have an operational network. We have legal agreements that are set up to allow the WHO, the survey country, and these international laboratories to work together. So we do have that support, and we're going to be expanding that network. Also, the Gates Foundation is supporting expansion of capacity for malaria molecular surveillance in Africa generally. And so there's going to be more capacity, I think, being built in the next sort of 12 to 24 months that would be able to support these kinds of activities. So I think that hopefully addresses your comments, or question. The other one was around in Senegal, and sorry, I'm going to just explain this in English, but I understood the question in French. The findings in Senegal of around this 5 to 7% deletions leading to false negative RDTs. And the threshold or the trigger for change is this 5% threshold. However, we recognize that the confidence intervals in your case almost certainly cross 5%. And to be able to determine whether or not you are above or below the 5% threshold, the sample sizes to be able to make that determination become very large. And therefore, we currently sort of advise that you look at those figures, see what the additional sample sizes would be to refine that estimate. And if those are not feasible, then we just suggest having a high level of, considering whether or not, it would be time to change, given that is the direction things are likely to go in, or if it's not, for a variety of reasons, the appropriate time to change, to continue to monitor this, the prevalence of the deletions causing false negative RDTs on an annual or every 2-year basis. And so it may be good to talk one-on-one a little bit about that situation in Senegal and see what might be the most feasible approach right now. But the 5% is the threshold. And then lastly, the question from Rwanda. Yes, we recognize that in many places that paired data on RDT and microscopy may not be available, but our suggestion was not that you try to gather that information, but where that information is available. So whether it's in specific surveys that are being done or in specific settings where RDT results are being confirmed or being screened, that if you have that data, then you can use it. And that was just a kind of indication of where you might want to get suspicious, but we don't recommend that you go out and collect that information specifically for that reason. I think in most countries now, there is already a signal. So whether it's a signal in the country itself where deletions have been confirmed or in the neighboring countries. So I think for most countries, and including Rwanda, you already have signals. You don't really need that paired data to signal to you that you have deletions. You actually know that deletions are present. You need to have the baseline survey, and then you need to continue to monitor that over time. I think
Great.
those were the questions
Yeah.
directed. I think it was back to Zambia to respond to the question regarding the quality assurance.
Actually, before we go to Zambia, just two quick questions. One is we're noting a number of countries adding on testing for HRP2 deletions in therapeutic efficacy studies, and your thoughts on that. And also, there's been an allusion to HRP2 deletion spread being related to some kind of pressure. And you noted that in Latin America, there was no pressure where this initially developed because they weren't using RDTs. But is there any evidence of that kind of pressure? It strikes me as a bit odd. These aren't drugs, these are diagnostics, but any thoughts on that?
Sure. So regarding TES, yes, you're correct. In a number of countries, including Madagascar, I guess I would say, and probably, yeah, in a number of countries, but Madagascar sticks out because it's a country where I'm aware that data from the most recent TES did confirm the presence of deletions. So the issues with, so I will never say, I guess, no to the opportunity to acquire some information about this issue. It's more about what you do with that information. So TES, the sample sizes that are obtained through TES are not adequate to be able to conclude that HRP2 deletions are not present. Also, TES surveys tend to target areas where malaria is most prevalent. And those are the areas where we expect HRP2 deletions to be the least likely to emerge as causing a problem. And so it is both in terms of the focus and I would say the scale of the TES that makes it insufficient to make definitive conclusions related to the presence or absence of HRP2 deletions. And so if they yield and find that there are deletions, then that's a signal that could then inform a larger survey. So in the case of Madagascar, the finding of HRP2 deletions there, and including dual deletions, I believe, for the first time, is a signal that the country needs to prioritize surveillance in that region and ideally across the rest of the country. And so it is useful for that purpose. But in other countries, and I can, again, I'm familiar with TES surveys with data from Kenya. I'm trying to think of another location where the TES didn't show that there were deletions, but we know from other surveys that deletions are present. So it just highlights that you can't conclude that they're not there, but if they are there, it provides a signal, but it's certainly not a replacement for a proper representative survey for HRP2 deletion. And then in terms of pressure, you're absolutely right. In South America, it's a perfect example of our lack of understanding of what is driving this issue, because we know that it wasn't RDT pressure. I've also previously mentioned that we don't have historical data from other locations. And so the data to support that RDT pressure is a factor is more based, I would say, on modeling, and also just in terms of where we've seen this emerge. So again, if you take the example of Eritrea, where you have a lower transmission setting, very high compliance with test and treat, no other channels other than through the national program to acquire drugs. It's sort of the perfect setup for where you would be selecting for HRP2 deleted parasites. But other than just those elements being in place and the resulting outcome of what was seen in Eritrea, our only other evidence base is just through modeling, which predicts that with continued use of HRP2 deleted parasites, you will select for those and they can become the dominant parasite in the population.
Thanks, Jane. Basiku, you want to respond to that?
Sure.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for the question. I think just to put the community health worker in context in Zambia, is that we, I think from past experience as well as from learning from other countries, including Rwanda, take recognizance of the fact that community health workers play an important role in pushing ahead with our agenda for malaria control and malaria elimination. So in Zambia, we have a ratio of 1 community health worker to about 500, and they are deployed in the areas that are considered hard to reach, and we've defined hard to reach as any population beyond the distance of 5 kilometers from an established health facility. So our current target is around 36,000 community health workers. Right now we are about roughly maybe 17, maybe 18,000. We hope by the end of this year we'll ramp that up to about 20,000 community health workers. And essentially their role for malaria is to essentially test those that are suspected for malaria, treat those that are positive for malaria, and be able to refer any cases that are severe to the next level, which is essentially a health facility. So when they are trained, in order to consolidate their skills, they are attached to the health facility, the supervising health facility, for a minimum of about 2 weeks, just to consolidate their clinical skills as well as their competency with the use of the rapid diagnostic tests. We have evidence in Zambia that all things being equal, community health workers have contributed to about 50% of the patient load in given health facility catchment areas. So really, they're really a valuable cadre of health worker. So in terms of trying to improve the quality of care at a community level, we've looked at trying to replicate our on-site technical support supervision, which is currently ramped up at a health facility level, and try and then move to a community and adapt it to the context of what is required in terms of being able to assure quality at a community level. And this uses essentially the same platform. We collect data on an electronic platform. And the idea is to make these quarterly visits to the community health workers themselves, follow a certain predetermined questionnaire in terms of trying to assess their competencies, both on the clinical side as well as on the diagnostic side, and actually do some observations of them, attending to a patient, as well as observe how they're actually doing the rapid diagnostic tests, how the safety is being done, how they're interpreting the data, are they waiting the appropriate period of time for them to interpret the rapid diagnostic test, how they're disposing of the bio-waste at a community level, and essentially look at all those parameters that constitute them to be able to do a quality job in terms of diagnosis and treatment. And when certain deficiencies, for example, are observed at that moment in time, there and then they are given that TA and given that technical support and that mentorship to try and improve their skills. Then at a later stage, again in the next quarter, what happens is that they are visited again. And I should also mention that when they are visited, those deficiencies are actually recorded in the electronic platform that is collecting the data, so that when you visit them the following quarter, you can be able to assess whether they have actually improved on the aspects that you had noted in the previous visit. And if there's any additional efforts around improving the quality, you again try and mentor that particular individual from that stage on. So essentially it is about that sort of interaction. You observe, you mentor, you provide feedback there and then, and provide on-site supervision so that it is done at that moment in time, and then you continue to follow through thereafter. Thank you.
Well, we're well over time for our coffee break, so unless there are any last comments, I think we'll close out this session. Coffee is outside, and at, I believe, 10:45, is it? 10:45, so. All right, thank you to our panelists, and particularly thank you to our colleague from Djibouti for stepping in at the last minute. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you proceed with the next session? So as we are approaching the closing session of our 3 days meeting, we would like to call here on the podium Mrs. Catherine Wolf, who will be going to present on behalf of the co-chair of Malaria in Pregnancy Working Group. So we are going to follow her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kate Wolf with JPIGO and Impact Malaria. And I'll be presenting on behalf of Julie Gutman and Maurice Bukagu, who are our working group co-chairs. Okay. Great. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the RBM Malaria and Pregnancy, or MIP, working group and some of the things that we've been working on. So the idea is just to give you like a brief overview of some of the things that we've been doing, and I'm happy to take questions at the end, either about the presentation or about other things that the working group is or could be doing. So the purpose of the MIP working group is really to align RBM partners on best practices and lessons learned around MIP programming, research, implementation, guidance, all of the same kinds of things that we're doing here just for MIP. And we focus on the WHO three-pronged approach to controlling malaria and pregnancy. So use of ITNs, prompt and effective case management, which is obviously our major area for overlap with this group, and on delivering at least 3 doses of IPTP in areas of moderate to high malaria transmission, which is really all of those countries are in sub-Saharan Africa. The other thing that we really do is focus on like advocacy and coordination. So coordination both within MIP partners as well as between MIP partners and other relevant partners with the RBM Secretariat. And we really emphasize partnership and coordination between malaria programs and reproductive health programs, because obviously a lot of the MIP programming is delivered through the ANC platform, which in most countries is run by either reproductive health or maternal and child health departments or programs. So we've seen in countries that have strong coordination and collaboration between those two departments, we see much stronger MIP programming. So for those of you who aren't familiar with MIP, I expect many of you are. This is just a brief overview. About 34% of pregnancies in sub-Saharan Africa are at risk of malaria in pregnancy or actually exposed to malaria infection during pregnancy. And that contributes to about 800,000 infants who are born with a low birth weight and about 20% of all of the stillbirths in sub-Saharan Africa. So this is a significant maternal and child health issue. The recent data that we have from the 2021 World Malaria Report shows almost half of pregnant women are sleeping under a net, but only 32% of eligible pregnant women are getting at least 3 doses of IPTP, and 17% of women who go to ANC never get any IPTP. And actually, maybe I should pause here. Is everyone familiar with the IPTP? I don't want to tell you things you already know. So we deliver intermittent preventive treatment of malaria and pregnancy using sulfadoxine and pyrimethamine. And the current guidance is to deliver at least 3 doses, at least 1 month apart, starting as early as possible in the 2nd trimester. That's the WHO guidance. I know some countries don't have it written exactly that way. So here I just wanted to show a little bit of data over the last 10 years. So the red line is women who intended ANC1 or ANC at least 1 time during their pregnancy. And then you can see the coverage for IPT 1, 2, and 3. And what we can see here is that a huge percentage of women living in the region do go to ANC at least once, but many of them are missing opportunities to get IPTP at the facility. And so we're really focused on closing some of these gaps and addressing the missed opportunities for women who are eligible for IPTP to get it at ANC. You'll also notice a big drop between 2019 and 2020 in coverage. I think that's probably not surprising to anyone here. We believe that we know that there was a disruption in routine health services in many places when COVID broke out. And that disruption was due to a variety of things, whether it be formal disruptions like lockdowns or facilities being closed, or like worries or concerns on the part of women about going to a health facility during the pandemic. And so we hope that these rates will continue to increase as we sort of move to this more endemic phase of COVID. But we really did see a big setback. So I'm going to talk for a minute about areas of collaboration between the MIP working group and other working groups, and of course I'll start with case management. So the obvious area for collaboration between our two work groups is looking at case management of malaria and pregnancy, and I started to allude to this yesterday when we were talking about indicators. For malaria and pregnancy, case management is really the area we know least about because of the lack of indicators, and so it's difficult to make programmatic or technical decisions about managing malaria and pregnancy because we have so little insight into what's actually happening. And there is a brief on our website that outlines indicators for malaria and pregnancy, including for case management of malaria and pregnancy, if that's something you're interested in looking at. And I think probably as this working group moves forward to continue to look at the case management indicators, I hope it will continue to be part of that discussion. For the SMERG, or the MERG, as you may have previously known it, again, there's a lot of area of overlap, looking at M&E indicators both for routine health systems and household surveys. With vector control, there's a lot of overlap since ANC is one of the main channels for ITN distribution. For SBC, as my colleague will probably talk about in a minute, there's a lot of overlap with promotion of ANC, attending ANC early, ensuring that women get the correct doses of IPTP. And then for the multi-sectoral working group, there's, of course, a lot of questions around resource mobilization and a lot of area for collaboration on advocacy for an adequate resource envelope and prioritization of malaria and pregnancy, since malaria and pregnancy tends to be the least well-funded of the 4 kind of malaria intervention pillars. So I'm going to talk a little bit about an advocacy campaign we've been working on for the last 2 years. It's the call to action to speed up, scale up IPTP. So the first call to action was in 2015. In 2012, WHO changed the guidance from at least 2 doses of IPTP to at least 3 during pregnancy. So the first call to action was in 2015 to really encourage countries to change their policy and implementation to ensure that more women got access to IPTP. And while that first call to action actually did contribute to a lot of the progress that we've seen, we still aren't reaching our global targets. And the disruptions due to COVID-19 and routine health services have made this even more of a challenge. And so in 2020, we launched the call to action to speed up, scale up IPTP. And this is an advocacy campaign that we are still working on. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about that. If you go to our website, on the RBM website, you can either go to the MIP working group or go straight to End Malaria, Speed Up, Scale Up, IPTP. And we've got a bunch of videos. I think probably lots of you recognize lots of the people up here. But they're just really short advocacy videos talking about malaria and pregnancy. Excuse me. And so they're really great to listen to. It's fun to hear a lot of these people talking about the importance of IPTP. Sorry, the video is playing. Sorry, one second. Apologies, everyone. Anyway, we'll just stay on this slide. So you can take a look at those videos. This is an advocacy video that we did as part of the call to action, and I thought we could just watch it quickly. It's just a few minutes.
beginning to understand the community, their breeding, their women. I think eliminating malaria will be, how will I say, it will be one of the best things that could happen in the maternity valley. Not just in the community at large, and even in the maternity, in the ANs, day-to-day activity, the children will be stronger, go to the school.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. Yeah, I can't get this back to where it was. All right. I think you, so what can you do to help us with this advocacy campaign? And I really do want to appeal to all of you because we need as many advocates as we can. We have a lot of webinars and events around this. We've had some big press briefings and other technical webinars looking at how to scale up IPTP and how to engage more. You can share the call to action, which is on our website, or this video, or any of the shorter clip videos on your social media, or with your professional communities or personal communities. Or you can share, like there's an infographic that's just talking about malaria and pregnancy, big highlights and talking points on it. And that's available in English and French, and I think Portuguese. And using any of those tools, either in country or at the global level, would be really helpful together. And we're trying to get a large number of signatories on it. Sorry. So the link to the letter is at the bottom of the site, but if you go to the Malaria and Pregnancy Working Group homepage, it is the first thing you'll see. And this is a letter of support calling to speed up, scale up IPTP. And our plan is to deliver it next year to heads of state and ministers of health at the AU Summit. And so we'd really appreciate, we want to get a lot of signatures. We want to get as many as we can. So we'd appreciate it if you could take a look at it and share it with your networks. And then finally, I just wanted to note that our annual meeting is going to be in Accra. It's the second week in September. It's really open to everyone, to all working group members. We'd love for you to join the MIP working group and to attend the meeting. For countries that are coming, we really encourage that an MCP and reproductive health person come together so that we can make sure everyone is on the same page about all the technical information and we can strengthen that coordination and collaboration. So please feel free to grab me at any time. I know we only have a little time left if you have questions about the meeting or about how to get on the list to sign up for the meeting or anything like that. And I will leave it there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Katrina, for a good presentation. And if we can recapitulate on what she presented, and we have been discussing all these 3 days. She's calling on partnership, good, strong collaboration, and also coordination, which enable to have good implementation of all intervention we are doing, so for a better health for mother. If we are going to have few questions after to hear the brief updates from the SBCC working group progress. Please, Stella Babalola.
Hello. So I'm here to make a short presentation on behalf of the SBC working group. And full disclosure, I'm here representing I'm not one of the co-chairs, so there might be questions that I'm not able to answer, just, full disclosure. Okay. So, like you say, the co-chairs are Gabrielle Onta and Miriam Nabukenya Wamala. So, what is the SBC working group? I'm going to be talking about who we are, what we have done in the recent past, and what our plans are for the future. So the SBC working group engages members from over 50 countries in English, French, and Portuguese. The working group cuts our activities cut across malaria technical interventions, including ITNUs, including MIP, including case management. And the technical guidance that we provide, the intention is to promote theory-based, evidence-based programming, focus on behavior change. So we intend to increase to strengthen the capacity of individual organization and systems to address issues related to malaria interventions using SBC approaches. We also focus on coordination and exchange. Excuse me, please. Okay. So we provide a forum for sharing malaria SBC best practices and experiences. This thing is just not cooperating with me, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. So, and also, main component of malaria control, cutting across technical areas. What is happening here? Okay. Okay, so I'll talk about, in 2021, what are the activities that we completed? We have 4 work streams. The first one in low transmission zones. So we had this low transmission zone work stream as an annex to the National Malaria SBC Strategy Guidance. So if you look at the guidance, we have added these additional component that pertains to low transmission zones. We also worked on SBC and Malaria Starts With Me. We created a guidance for implementing SBC and Zero Malaria Starts With Me. We also completed the malaria SBC during COVID-19. We curated case studies showcasing successful implementation of malaria SBC in the context of COVID-19, and we also updated guidance for SBC during SBC, adding that section to it. Okay. Finally, we developed and we started to implement an MIC SBC model, which is, a model that focuses on SBC variables, SBC-related variables. I think it's not the entire, questionnaire that we will use for a special MBS survey, but these are some questions that can be added to the questionnaire for MIS to collect information that will enable us to determine what should be the focus of interventions that are geared towards promoting those behaviors. The community health worker toolkit is in progress. We are making good progress. The final product of this work stream includes a package of modular material to guide SBC context in CHW, community health worker training. And this can be adapted to country-specific contexts. This toolkit is intended to be used by supervisors of CHWs to train CHWs. And to train them, to conduct training for them to be able to, address or do their work better. And what does that entail? You know, there are topics in the SBC worker toolkit. There are topics on principles of SBC approaches, community mobilization, and malaria prevention, malaria testing. All those topics that will make a CHW perform better and do their work and serve their community in a more productive way. So like I said, this is in development, and we are looking forward to finishing this and making it available for the community. Another topic that, you know, in 2022 we are working on, another work stream focused on SBC for RTSS vaccine introduction. And the expected deliverable for this work stream includes guidance on SBC for the implementation. Key steps in the work streams include capturing learnings from RTSS pilot experience, as well as COVID reduction. So what are the experiences? What are the lessons that we could learn from those two vaccines? We are going to be reviewing the reports from the field. We are going to mount interviews, and we are going to draft and revise the guidance. So those are the things that we hope to do in 2022. Other information from the group. The SBC quarterly call is happening on July 14. So please call, get in touch with us and be part of that call. It's going to be at 9 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, or 1300 GMT or 1600 East African Time. And then the annual working group meeting is virtual this year. It's happening in September 21 to 22, and the deadline for abstract is on July 9. If you are interested, please you can follow that link and submit your abstracts. So this year is going to be virtual. Finally, please stay in touch with us. Here is our website, and here is the email list. If you want to be part of the working group, if you want to get in touch with the co-chairs, please go to that link and submit your email. And here are the contacts: Ashley Riley, the secretariat, and then the two co-chairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella. As you have been following her presentation, there is the words still coming: coordination, collaboration, and this is some keywords which remain in very key core components to tackle malaria. And as she mentioned, to be able to scale up different intervention and supportive how malaria can be prevented. Then there is that slogan where she was saying, zero malaria starts with me and with you. So for the audience, if there is any clarification you need from to take a couple of questions, then proceed with clarification and response. Thank you.
Oh, any questions?
A working group on doing all that. My comment is on what messaging or advocacy is targeting the mothers or the pregnant women that are actually need to do this IPTP. A lot of it seems to be focusing on the upper level. Are there any advocacy within the population that would require this advocacy? The link between that and actually the pregnant women?
So I think from the data slide I showed, most of the women in the region are coming to ANC at least once. And so that's kind of, that's a great touch point for us to be able to start at least talking to them about IPTP. Most of the women come at least in their second trimester, if not their third. And so most women are eligible to get IPTP the first time that they come to the facility. So a lot of our advocacy work is really on the health system to help the actors in the health system ensure that women are getting IPTP when they come to the facility. And that has been the bulk of our work. But I think your point is still really important. And we have actually been like liaising a little bit with the SBC working group, because the community toolkit that Stella mentioned, that's a pathway for CHWs to really reach those women, to make sure that they know that they need to come into ANC early and that they keep returning to ANC to keep continuing to get IPTP. And so I think that's the avenue that we're looking at to like do more demand generation as opposed to the advocacy for like more formal stakeholders.
Hi, Catherine. I'm actually a member of the Malaria and Pregnancy Working Group, as you know, but and it was interesting to see in your Venn diagram.
Have shown that SP, not only is it still effective, but it is, and this is, you know, the technical term, it is not inferior to any of the other drugs that it has been compared to in clinical trials. And that's really critical. And, you know, I think Matt Chico has an excellent paper about this, really talking about how it's likely that the antimicrobial qualities of SP are contributing not just to malaria and pregnancy, but to other pregnancy conditions that influence birth outcomes like low birth weight. And that's probably part of the reason that SP really continues to be the drug of choice, even though we see levels of resistance that look concerning on paper. In practice, SP continues to be our best option at this point. It's also our most cost-effective option. So I do just want to lead with that, because I know that a lot of providers are nervous about SP not working anymore because we don't use it for treatment anymore. And so I do want to reassure everyone that, in fact, it has continually been shown to be the drug of choice. Coming to the case management, what we call IST or SST. So IST is intermittent screen and treat, and SST is single screen and treat. When are tested on their first visit, they're eligible. There's been a lot of discussion about that. I think FICO is actually looking at the data right now. I haven't seen his analysis of it. I'm certainly very curious about it. That is not screen and treat. Rwanda actually did a really interesting study on that, and the benefits were not convincing that it should be a useful intervention. And I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Aileen or Dr. Noella, who I think you both were the co-PIs, and you can probably speak to your experience with that better. Thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. Regarding the study we have been conducting, we had 2 arms. Another one were receiving the IPT. It was an intermittent screen treatment. Then we're looking in terms of follow-up, as you have mentioned. We didn't see any difference between the 2 groups. Resistance to SP, we have stopped to do the IPTP program, and we put more strengthening the use of other preventive measures. And as we have been seeing that it was working, then we stay doing that one. So that's why and also the purpose of doing that study was to see if there will be a need to reintroduce that one. And based on those findings, we stay using other measures instead of reintroducing the SP. Then there are even other publications were done later after that study, which show that even if the amodiaquine SP was suspended long time since 2006, but we still find in some places where the marker of resistance to ASP is still there. Thank you. If no other question for our panelists, I would like to ask you to give a round of applause. I don't have time.
Sorry, I did just want to make one additional comment, and this was regarding a discussion yesterday, or possibly on the first day. There was a question about whether community IPTP leads to a reduction in ANC attendance. And there is some data coming out of the Tip-Top project, which looked at community IPT over 2 years in Mozambique, Madagascar, Nigeria, and DRC. And I believe not only did it not decrease ANC coverage, but in 3 of those 4 countries, ANC4 coverage actually went up. And so we have a lot of excitement and hope around community IPTP being one of the tools in our toolbox to speed up, scale up IPTP. So I just wanted to address that point from the other day. Thank you.
Yeah, for your addition and good thoughts and discussion. So, as we have been saying, to give our presenter a round of applause, we thank you for this good. And we take this opportunity to call our co-chairs, Dr. Larry and Dr. Elizabeth, to give the discussion and also updates on next steps and closing.
It's here, it's moved, but I think he needs to control it or something. Oh, sorry.
Yes, Dr. Larry, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to start with a long list of thank yous. First off, one of the things we were most nervous about coming into this meeting was, would the IT platform work? Would people be able to view this? And so I think we should all give a round of applause to Jules and the IT team. I've been to many meetings and I've seen this is the least number of glitches, and most of the glitches were mine. So, so we really appreciate the excellent IT support and the recording, and from the messages I've been getting from people back in Washington and other places commenting on the sessions, it is being viewed outside of this room. So we're very happy about that. I'll also thank the translators who, we've made a soft commitment to find the resources to ensure that at the next meeting we'll also have translation in Portuguese for our. I didn't mention this at the beginning of the meeting, but we've had 2 rapporteurs for this meeting, and I want to thank them both, Charlotte Edis and Adam Notham, and they'll be putting together meeting notes for the meeting, so we appreciate their work, and since I'm their boss, they will be completing those in a timely fashion. And then again, want to thank the organizing committee. 2 of them are not here, Mirava Katesin and Andrea Bozeman. Also, my colleagues, both my colleagues sitting next to me, Elizabeth Juma and Dr. Aline Uwimana. I'll get for their, and I also want to specifically call out Dr. Aline and also Noella Umalisi from the Impact Malaria Project, JPIGO office, for organizing what I think has universally been an excellent field trip. It really was quite great, and I think quite remarkable that there are CHWs that have been doing their work for 16, 20 years. That's quite remarkable, and a credit to the MOPDD, the RBC, and also the broader ministry that and the Child Health Department that administers the program. We also want to thank the RBC for hosting us here in Rwanda, and the Minister of Health for opening the meeting. He was, unfortunately, he got pulled away, but he actually really wanted to come to the drug resistance session, but hopefully he'll be able to view the recording, and we are very, very grateful for that. In terms of our financial support for the meeting, we want to thank Swiss Tropical Public Health and the Swiss Development Corporation for the sponsorship of our participants and the Secretariat support, and in particular, Constantina, who's been behind the scenes remotely helping us, particularly with the virtual platform and with organizing the slides and all of that, and our on-site support, Lena, who's been behind the scenes making sure everything runs smoothly, so we very much appreciate that. And maybe we can give her a little round of applause. Who have I left out? Yes, well, the other financial support is for some of the participants, and the support for the field trip. It goes to PMI through the PMI Impact Malaria Project, and we thank them for that support. I think I'm running out of people to thank. Beyond everybody who's here, the discussions, the panels, the question and answer was really amazing in the United States or in Europe. To hear what really are the challenges that countries are facing is very important and very valuable. And so we very much appreciate all of you participating very actively and not sugarcoating your responses, speaking very bluntly and honestly. So thank you very much, and I think we should all give everybody a round of applause for that. And all protocols observed, in case I missed anybody. Hopefully I haven't missed. But, you know, I think for me, a couple of thoughts about the meeting. I think, first off, on a positive note, the fact that the issues that we're discussing are a credit to the fact that for the basics of malaria case management, the countries have made amazing progress. It was only 2011 that the guidance on universal diagnostic testing was put into place, and you know the guidance on ACTs was a little bit sooner, but the fact that we can now focus on things like severe malaria and HRP2 deletions and drug resistance is in part because you know, I as someone who's worked on malaria diagnostics since 1995, and actually first saw a parasite when I was 12 years old in my mother's microbiology lab, the rapidity at which countries have scaled up RDTs and strengthened microscopy has really been, I never anticipated it would happen that quickly. I thought, you know, countries would be very set in their ways and physicians would be very adamant that they know what a malaria case is, and some of that still exists. But the fact that we have been able to scale up routine case management of uncomplicated malaria really is a testament to all of you and the work you've done in your countries. We still have things to do. There's still quality improvement to be done. And clearly there are areas of bigger challenges like severe malaria, like drug resistance. But the fact that we can concentrate on that is the result of the work we've done to get the basic program up and running. The other thing I think that's been very clear, whether it's the results of Caramel or indicators for monitoring, that malaria malaria control and elimination can't be achieved in isolation just with the National Malaria Control Program, that it really needs a whole systems approach, and not just the public sector, but also the private sector, and it needs engaging supply chain, parts of the ministry, the health service delivery department, and also other ministries, as well as the non-governmental partners and communities. So it's not a simple challenge, but it's something that we ultimately need to tackle to get to, if we're going to really effectively achieve goals on severe malaria management, if we're going to address drug resistance. So I think those are, to me, the two of the big themes that come out of this meeting, and we have work to do. The last one perhaps is that we very much appreciated all the input on the monitoring evaluation of malaria case management. We feel energized to now take the next step and really begin that critical review. I think we appreciate the collaboration of WHO, the Monitoring Evaluation Reference Group, and other partners. And we will likely be coming back to you with many more questions and looking for your thoughts and opinions about the M&E indicators. So don't be surprised if an email pops in your box in the next few months asking for you to fill out a survey or undergo an interview so we can really gather a very robust perspective on the current indicators and the gaps and the challenges. So I think with that, maybe I'll turn it over to Elizabeth if she has any other ideas or thoughts on this.
Thank you very much, Larry, and thank you very much, colleagues, for your great participation at this meeting. I would like to extend appreciation to the one person Larry forgot, who is Adam. Thank you very much for your support also in the planning and logistics support for this meeting, and also to the Impact Malaria teams in many countries that also contributed to this support. Just two thoughts going forward. I think when the case management working group started, we had a work stream on procurement and supply chain management. I think we still need some continuing support on PSM issues. We have plenty of commodities, and we still face challenges in achieving full complement of availability of our different products at the various levels of the healthcare system. I think we have hacked very well quantification, probably not too well forecasting and call downs and, trying to match global supply with what we would need locally. And maybe the experts in PSM, the partners, could probably let's get together and see how we can strengthen this, because access is also about availability, particularly for severe malaria. If the commodity is not available, then it doesn't matter how much more we do. The other area that has come up that we need to strengthen, again with advocacy, is capacity building, continued capacity building. and attaching that to the ongoing mentorship, OTSS activities that are ongoing. But the other two, you cannot mentor someone who does not have the knowledge, and you cannot OTSS when they don't even have the basics. So we need to have a continuing process where these things build upon each other so that we are not losing the health worker capacity in our work. So we have work to do as programs in our planning. Don't always accept to take no for an answer. Determine your needs and plan to execute your needs so that you can achieve what you want to achieve for your program. We can all agree that, you know, it's not just about commodities, it's about delivery, but also the skills to deliver them in a timely fashion and in a timely manner. Let's also keep an eye on surveillance for resistance and surveillance for HRP2 deletions. I hope Jane's message was very clear. The countries that are bordering east, the countries whose researchers have detected, please let's get our surveillance acts going so that we are not caught out when it is too late. So those are the issues that I wanted to add onto, and also to thank you most sincerely. I mean, it's been a while since we all met face to face, so this has really been a very exciting moment and meeting for us all. Thank you very much.
And unfortunately, I hate to end the meeting on a sad note, but Elizabeth and I have, for obvious reasons, COVID, Elizabeth and I have been in these positions for quite a long time. Elizabeth, even longer than I have. And so I think we've finally worn Elizabeth down, and she is planning to step down as co-chair of the working group. And so we will be going through a process of nominations and elections to identify someone who can fill her shoes. It's a moment to say how wonderful it has been to work with Elizabeth. She brings a perspective, an understanding of this region that is pretty hard to match, and also is very much a balance to, she is a very, she's the one who pulls me off the ledge. So, I want us all to, if we could, to thank Elizabeth for her time, and encourage anybody who's interested in serving as co-chair to do a couple of things. One, feel free to reach out to me or to Elizabeth to find out what it involves. And two, when the nominations come out, please nominate people you think would be able to help me push this forward. So if we could, thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, so I'll hand it back to Arlene. And again, thank Dr. Arlene, thanks to you, all the members of the MOPD, the Ministry of Health, the RBC, for your help in making this meeting a success.
Thank you, Larry, Elizabeth, and all participants. We really appreciate your stay here in Rwanda, and we have learned a lot during this discussion, and we are committing to do better of what you have been doing. We ensure you that what the insight, also some best practice from this presentation we have been following during these 3 days we will translate and try to improve what we are doing so far and make our people better life, as is the national goal, and in collaboration with our leadership from the high top to the lower level to the population itself. So we are committed to eliminate malaria. So again, we are thanking all of you, and we can close this meeting, and really we will continue to collaborate and engage each and everyone to tackle these diseases. Thank you.
One last logistical point. If you need a COVID test and you haven't gotten it yet, please come see us. And there are the testing is available here at the hotel. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, and have safe travels. We will see you again soon. It's ended earlier than we anticipated, but I think all is good. Let us use this time to interact before lunch and also during lunch and after lunch. Thank you all, and do have safe journeys and a good week coming in the coming days. Thank you.